and then I'll talk about them. So people are aware of the framework. I think students like to be aware of the framework. I know what you mean. But there are different ways of doing that. I think in Qatar it was a big mistake. The teachers just did it because they had to do it. There was no understanding of the students. An objective can be quite complex. How does the student understand the objective in an abstract form? It's a strange thing to do. If the objectives are simple, okay, but they can be quite tricky. Anyway.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And let's go to the number question 4. What are the characteristics of new textbook? I mean, this purple color textbook.
The Eki textbook.
Eki textbook, yes.
Yeah. Well, there are 3 units per year.
And maybe I have to give it back to music one.
Yeah, there are. This is the English syllabus for the 12-year-olds in the Basque Country, and
12 years.
12-year-old, yeah, and
junior high school.
Yeah, and this is the English syllabus, and there are three units per year. They're quite substantial. So each unit is actually a textbook. This is about music, and it takes content from the musical curriculum. It's obviously the music teachers have agreed on the content. This one is The Secret of the Ocean, so it's biology and environmental science, both. And the third one is The World of Inventions, which is taken from the technology curriculum. It's called technology as a subject in the Spanish curriculum. It doesn't cover everything, of course, in technology. You wouldn't want to do that. It only covers a certain aspect. So this covers inventions, for example. The concept of inventions, they will work on it in Basque, but in a slightly different way. In biology, they do work on the oceans at this age, but in a slightly different way. You know? So, for example, the music thing, at the end, they have to do like an X Factor presentation. They have to change the genre of the
talent show.
Talent show, that's right. But obviously, we're working musical concepts in order for them to do that, but we're doing it in a different way from the musical. The music teacher won't do it like that, but some of the concepts will be similar. So we've obviously liaised with those subject teachers. But this is soft CLIL, but it's hard soft CLIL.
My question is,
you could be fooled by this.
How often do they learn English with this textbook? This is main textbook of English. Or first question is that how often? How many classes do they have?
They have more hours, yeah, they have more hours with this. They have at least 4 hours here.
4 hours a week?
Yeah,
4 hours a week.
4 or 5, some have 5. In the normal curriculum, it's only 3 hours.
73 hours per year or per semester? Or
yeah, around
73
there, yeah.
hours?
Yeah, or maybe a little bit more. Some do 5 hours, most do 4. But they have to do 4, they can't do 3. There's a minimum of 4 hours for the English syllabus. The schools have to agree to do 4 hours of English as a minimum. Some do 5.
75 per month, not per month, but per semester.
Yeah.
Three.
Well, we talk. I think in trimesters. I think September to December, and then I also think of September to Christmas, Christmas to Easter, and Easter to summer. You know?
So it means that for 3 months, the students are going to learn with this textbook.
Yes, only one. The music one they will do from September to almost to Christmas, about the end of November. Yeah, that's right. So it's quite substantial content. So the whole concept of what they're doing is completely different, because an English language teaching textbook takes 1 unit for about 3 pages. It might last 1 week if you're lucky. This lasts much longer. So the whole design, the whole idea is completely different. It's radically different. And of course it's based on the final task, which in this case in music is this X Factor thing.
And one more question about this. For example, if students use this textbook, music textbook, do they have a music class?
Yes.
Outside?
Yeah, they're still doing
this
music.
is soft CLIL English class.
It's not replacing.
So they have 4 or 5 hours English class per week, and they may have 1 or 2 music class.
They have 2 hours of music, yeah. They don't
outside
have,
of this English class.
Yeah. So the music teacher would be careful not to do exactly the same thing. There would be similar things, but they wouldn't do it in exactly the same way. They'll still talk about, in here we talk about musical genres, musical types of instruments. We talk about performance criteria and things, but the music teacher will have those on his or her syllabus, but they'll turn them down. They'll turn them down. They'll do them, but they'll turn them down because they know that they're being dealt with in English in a different way. But they'll still have to look at them in Basque. but they won't be repeating the materials. Repeating the materials will be terrible. So we
try not to.
The procedural content is very different. The conceptual content is similar. It's taken from the group, but the procedural content is completely different. They won't be doing an X Factor presentation with video clips in music. They'll do it in English.
And for example, that that if we use this music textbook, it seems that there aren't much reading or there aren't much writing. So it seems that they quite focus on speaking.
Well, speaking and writing as well. There's a lot of speaking, yeah. But there tends to be generation of text rather than reading lots of text. I mean, there are mini text, smaller text, but there's not many big text. You're right. Maybe there could be.
So my question is that you think that it's the students. So you think that among 4 skills, speaking should be focused on most in these textbooks?
No, I don't look at it like that. If I would ask you the question. I won't ask you, but I would say, why do you want lots of text? And if you want lots of text in a textbook, it's because you're working on reading strategies, presumably. There's no other reason why you want in a language textbook. Why do you want texts? Because you're looking at the various strategies to get around, the various techniques to look at reading strategies. But reading strategies in this unit are only one factor. They need speaking strategies, they need listening strategies, they need all the strategies possible. Reading is only one of them. So that's why there's not a lot of text. You might find in The Secrets of the Oceans,
yes,
there is more text.
They have more text.
Right. Well, that's logical, isn't it? Because biology is a more text-based sort of thing. You would expect to have to confront certain text. In music, I mean, you get musical text can be a score. I mean, there are no scores here, but musical text is different, isn't it? So the only text that you get in the musical text is like biographical text about the biography of the group. They have to write the biography of this group they've invented. The Shattered Teeth, or whatever they call it, or the dentist's chair, or whatever the group is called. And we give them a model. We say, look, here's a real biography of a group, and they use the model to write their own biography, and then speak it on the video. But as you say, really, the emphasis is on the spoken word. They have to present the biography. On X Factor, they do. When they come, they present themselves. Simon Cowell says, "Hi, what's your name?" And my name is so and so and so, and this is my group, and we met 5 years ago, and da da da. So they're doing what they do on the TV, and in the end, the emphasis, they have to write in order to prepare that spoken thing. But again, I emphasise, what I'm interested in is the procedural and conceptual aspect of presenting your group in a biographical way. I'm not interested in whether it's speaking, reading, or writing. I'm interested in the conceptual, procedural aspects of that. You know what I mean? It's not primarily. I don't look at it in 4 skill terms. Never. Never. The only way I would do that would be, I would think, maybe there's too much speaking in this unit, or
too much what?
Maybe, for example, if I say maybe there's too much speaking in the first part of this unit, and I think, right, okay, I'll compensate that some way. So in the second part of the unit, maybe I would compensate and put a bit more listening or writing or reading, because I don't want to overdo one skill. In that sense, I'm aware of it, but I'm not working from that perspective of listening, reading, writing, speaking. No. I'm only using those skills in order to do something else, which is to present the group and do the final task. So this is soft CLIL, but it's kind of hard soft CLIL.
And I think that this is for junior high school student English class, and English is a first. Is it first time for students to learn English?
No, they've been learning since they were 4, so they're quite good. I mean, they're quite accustomed to English. It doesn't mean that they're fantastic.
So this is the 3rd year for them.
No. They've been learning since they were 4. 4 years of age.
4th grade?
4 years of age. No, 4 years of age.
4 years of age they have been learning.
So they're 12.
8 years they have learned.
Yeah, this is their 9th year in English. Yeah, and it starts very little. It's just at 4 they do 1.5 hours a week in half-hour sessions, and little by little it increases on the project. So by the time they get to secondary, they're doing 4 or 5 hours. And also, of course, when they get to grade 9, then they're doing probably 7 hours in English.
So you think that after 8 years it's possible to use this textbook, not for the kind of the very beginner?
I resist that idea.
No. Yes, actually, I'm thinking about using some of the text from music. I'm Eki, especially music, because I'm a music school teacher. So I think that for them, this is a 7th year. I mean, they have learned formal English learning, so 6 years. So at the 7th year, it might be a little possible. The language level of the Spanish students, Japanese students are really different. But I think that if they are really beginner, I thought it is quite difficult. But I understand. You said that it's
I resist this idea.
No.
I don't like this idea.
Okay.
I mean, I think that you do have to have a minimum level to do a certain kind of work. But I resist this idea that you need a pre-language level in order to be able to do something. I think this is the wrong message. You know, I think that just forget the language level. If the design of the materials is good, if it's correct, if they know what they're doing, then I don't think it's a question of easy or difficult language. I really don't. I think that your students could do this. I hope they could. The fact that these students have been working from 4 doesn't condition particularly the way I do it. I say that. I know you've all been saying this on the course, but
yes, I think that today
it's a very traditional idea. Christian is saying the same thing. He has been on, but I don't agree with him. I think Christian's thinking that language level goes like this, ding, 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 and only at certain points can you do certain things. I disagree radically with this. I don't think that's true. I think that if the materials design is good, then they can do it. Yeah. The weaker students can do this. I think CLIL is a mixed ability. I think it's a mixed ability method, sine qua non. I don't think it's for elite. If it was for an elite, it wouldn't be so successful. You ask me why is CLIL a phenomenon now? Well, I think that's one of the reasons, because I think it is mixed ability. I think that weaker students can get something. They can do something.
But in this textbook, there was no grammar focus page.
No.
Actually, that all other textbook, ESL or EFL, they have a certain grammar explanation, the syntax and vocabulary. But you focus on some vocabulary in this textbook, but no pages on grammar. So does it mean that teachers themselves have to provide some materials to teach grammar sometimes? For example, if they have no idea of present continuous, it is the teacher who teach present continuous on the spot, or do you think that teachers should get some material from other textbook and use them?
We did provide it's a sort of virtual workbook. There is a virtual workbook which if the teachers think that something's come up, for example, imagine that the present perfect has come up, or imagine that the third S on the third person S, their students are not putting it on enough, then they can go to the workbook. There's a virtual workbook, and they can find exercises and they can do them. And from time to time, we encourage them to do this. I'm not against that. I think that some students do like drilling, and their online drilling activities, which derive from the linguistic demands. So we haven't ignored that. I'd be much happier if we didn't have to do that, but I think we do sometimes, particularly for weaker students, and some students do need to drill these things. But in general, as you say, during the work, the teacher doesn't stand out much and make many metalinguistic reflections. Sometimes we have the occasional activity which says, hey, look, there's a lot of the passive. Look at the inventions. There's a lot of passives here. What is this? And we do a bit of work on the passive actually in the textbook in inventions, because the passive always comes up in inventions. It was invented by. You can't ignore this. But it goes back to what I was saying in the first week, that the English teacher, like the subject teacher, is trying to make the language salient. They're trying to make these key structures in the language salient. They're highlighting them, but they're not as such. They're not necessarily teaching them as such. So the English teacher's role begins to change. If the student is doing this well and is learning, then they don't need to know that it's called a present continuous. They're using the present continuous correctly. So why do they need to know about it? I'm a little bit militant about this. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have metalinguistic awareness, but it depends how you achieve that. I think by involving the students, you achieve it. And again, as we said before, possibly you would want to focus them on some of the language. We do, actually, if you look carefully. We sometimes focus them on language, but always afterwards. Always after using it. Never before. We never focus them on it before. We don't say, you're going to have to do this do this thing tomorrow, so make sure you know how to say da da da, or make sure you know the present continuous, or make sure you know the difference between the past simple and the present perfect. We never say that.
Okay, and it's very interesting for me and impressive. But in case that your student, Spanish student, will say, I'd like to take a test of IELTS or a TOEFL examination to go to UK or American university, how do you think students compromise? I mean that they are not used to the grammar focus.
That's a good question.
And
That's
I think that IELTS and TOEFL, they have a kind of the grammar section. Section, but
that's a very good question, and of course we've had to face this because the project's been going on since 1991. It's a long-term project, so we had to face this. And so the problem with, say, Cambridge exams, take Cambridge exam for example, take the certificate, which most Spanish students will sit at some point. The students who've been doing this project pass it very easily in general, but they need a bit of training. Why? Because they need to be trained, as you say, in the techniques of the exam itself. Linguistically speaking, it's no problem for them. They find it actually most of them find it quite easy. I've got some results, I'm going to show you them tomorrow, of the first cohorts of this project when they got to 2002, and they'd been in the project they were about 14, 15 years of age. The first ones who started at 4, and their results were much, much higher than the control groups. Much higher. And they did the Trinity exam, they did the Trinity, and they all got level 7, 8 in Trinity, and 72% got past level 8. But we'd not trained them linguistically. All we did was, we said, you're going to do a Trinity exam, you have to do this. We just showed them what they had to do. We didn't train them linguistically to do it. So all exams, all external exams like Cambridge have a certain
grammar section.
I mean, you can go and do a course, can't you, in an academy in Japan? You can go and do a course to prepare for first certificate.
Right. That's
but you're not necessarily preparing yourself linguistically. You're also preparing yourself in the technique of passing first certificate. Okay, these students don't get so much of that. I admit that. So if they're going to do first certificate, then we say, okay, go to an academy and practice first certificate. But linguistically, you'll have no problem. They've got much more language. They've got much more language than the average candidate.
What I found problem in Japanese way of teaching is that it seems that to take test is kind of a goal. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But it seems that what you said was that the goal is not to take an examination. It means that it's for Japanese. I mean that to take higher score in TOEFL or IELTS is a kind of the educational objection. Educational objective.
Yeah.
But what you said so far was that they learn English kind of, not linguistically formally, but they learn English while using. So it seems that they take an examination as a kind of it's an
endorsement of their linguistic abilities. They're not, as you said, they're just learning English like this. But from time to time, they might go across and say, okay, I'll do first certificate. It's not their objective. If they pass the first certificate, great. If they don't, well, some don't, but most do. Or proficiency or whatever. So yeah, you're right. They're not being taken on that path because the objective is the examination. The objective is to
learn, to do something using English, using English.
Exactly.
So they can show their English ability by IELTS, by TOEFL.
Yes.
But for Japanese, it's different. They learn English linguistically using the textbooks, and they show their English ability by test.
Yes.
So it's really two different things.
Yes, it is. Yeah, well, I don't think it's not the case in the whole of Spain. These particular students are in the Basque Country, and there are 120 schools using these materials.
120?
120 schools using these materials. It's quite a lot. It's a big enough sample to be significant. In the rest of Spain, I can't legislate for the rest of Spain. They're using some of my hardcore, my hard kill materials. Hardcore kill materials, but the soft ones we don't know yet because these go on sale in September. But the point we haven't mentioned, Giara, is that also this is a competence-based curriculum. If you look closely at this book, which you have been doing, you'll see that it's actually based on a series of what's called the situational competence. So the students are given a situation. The situation in music is that they have to they're going to have to do a music presentation at the end of the year for the rest of the school. And it's going to be this almost like they're going to have to perform. It's part of the school festivities. So the situation is real. Okay.
Situation is real. Yes, I understand. Situation is real. Authentic.
So the thing about competences is that this goes back to Roger, the Belgian writer. He says you can't show that you're competent unless you do something. There has to be an action. So the ICI stands for Euskal Curriculum Integral. It means integrated Basque curriculum, and what it means is that in this integrated Basque curriculum, it's all situational. It's not going back to notions and situations. It says that they have to face something at the end of the unit, got to do something, and in order to prepare for that, they have to show that they're competent. So the situation's real, and they have to plan the situation. They have to say, right, for us to do this presentation, we've got to have a mobile phone or a video, we've got to do a storyboard, we've got to do this, we've got to record it, we've got to decide who does it, we've got to write the script, we've got to present it. There's all these things, it's a lot of things. It looks very, X Factor, sounds like superficial, but it's not. There are various competencies, and they have to show that they're competent in preparing and performing. They look at performance criteria. They also have to judge the other students. Well, how do they judge them? Well, they have to work out what the performance criteria are. And they have to judge them. You have to say, we think your performance was quite good, but you sang very well, but your instrument playing was terrible. So we give them this kind of language. These are scaffolds. But they have to, and then the next thing is they do this presentation, and then there's what's called a transfer situation. So they do another situation which transfers the competences into a different situation. They have to show that they can also adapt to genres, but in a different situation. So it's interesting. They have to show their competence by confronting the situation, and they have to also endorse and prove the competence by showing that they can transfer those skills to another situation. The same skills to another situation.
So far, what I understand is that now it seems it's very important. People say it's important to use English authentic text, but what you do is that what you say is that to introduce authentic, performance place or authentic place.
It's the authentic action. Yes.
Authentic action.
I don't think it matters about authentic text.
You say that let's have a talent show. It's a kind of authentic place, authentic activity.
Yeah, good. That's
Semi-authentic activity.
Okay, because the school imposes it. It's always set. You're right. You're right.
Not TV is broadcasting.
Okay, the school imposes it, but the situation has to be a situation that is potentially real for that student. You can't give them a situation which would not be relevant to a 12-year-old in a scholastic context.
Right.
So that's the.
So school is a kind of their place to live.
Absolutely, school is a context.
So you mean that you like to provide a kind of as much as authentic.
Yeah, the situation is authentic, exactly. I don't think that texts have to be necessarily authentic. They have to look like they are. I think that the use of authentic text is fine, but it's a different objective. If you ask students to research on the internet, they will find authentic text, so you have to help them with that. But I don't think it's a black and white law. It existed once upon a time in ELT, but I don't think authentic text is necessarily better than text I could create or manipulate.
I come to understand.
Sometimes you can't find the damn text. It's much better to write it yourself, as long as you write it to make it look authentic. As long as you put in the discourse and the structure that would exist in the authentic text. I don't see why it has to necessarily be authentic. It's a strange idea.
About your textbook, what I found was that there aren't much. The page is not wrong. I mean that it's not kind of a thick book.
No.
So what I found was that it is teachers' competence. Or it depends on teachers' ability how to develop the.
That's right.
Class. I mean that it is written that the material is designed, but each teacher has to design their classroom. So I think that it's really depends on teachers' competence.
Yeah, you're right.
What kind of imagination she has.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look at the activities, really, almost all the time the students are doing things. The students are being asked to do things all the time. And so it's really a question of the teacher's management. The teacher doesn't input very much, actually. The teacher's really kind of managing, almost like the guy who conducts the orchestra. The orchestra are playing in the Eki course. The teacher has to make sure that they're playing the right notes, and that they're playing in the right places, and that they're playing their instruments and not doing something else. The teacher isn't inputting a great deal. It's the students who are. It's very student-centred. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is. If it's task-based, it must be student-centred by default, anyway. So, as you're quite right, the teacher becomes more of a facilitator rather than a teacher as such. The verb to teach means to transmit knowledge to those students. Well, the teacher is not transmitting knowledge. The teacher is kind of fine-tuning the knowledge, making sure that they are developing in their knowledge of this musical unit by managing the class properly. It's much more about management. You're quite right.
Yeah, I understand. The teacher might be quiet, but she has to have kind of hidden her ability.
Yes.
She doesn't come to the class too much time, but she has the competence and to facilitate it. She knows how to.
You must know what the steps are. The steps are described in the book and in the guide. But yeah, when you go in on Monday morning, you know that you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and you've got to get those steps right, or it won't work. So it's not the input so much, it's making sure that you've managed the steps correctly, and that one thing goes on to another, and then it makes sense to the students. So again, it's very different. It's much more like subject teaching.
Yeah,
it's
really interesting. Okay, let me move to the question 5. Sorry, I take your time. Number 5 is, what is the expectation to the teacher and students who use this brand new textbook? I think that you and there are a group of teachers, group of material designers developed this textbook by having certain intention. Maybe there you changed or you improved former textbook.
Well, yeah, subject projects. This is called subject projects, and originally it was written, about 10 years ago. But it's still on sale. It's on sale in Spain in general now. But yeah, we've made it into a slightly tighter framework in terms of competencies. So it was competence-based before, but it wasn't situational. So we've changed some of the situations. Yeah, we made it more situation-based, I think. Before it was fairly competence-based, but it wasn't necessarily situational. And so there's much more planning required by the students, much more self-reflection, particularly as well. They have to reflect quite a lot on what they're doing. They have to plan a lot. They have to make sure they understand. They have to test each other's understanding before they continue. Each step is quite important. They've got to know what they're doing, and it's quite rigid in that sense. Apart from that, it's very autonomous and very student-based. So we have changed it a bit, yeah.
And how long did it take to design these 3 textbooks?
It's taken me and the other team all year, really. It's taken us a whole year.
A year? 1 year?
And as you said, we were actually adapting the previous materials, but it's still taken us a year. It's a very intensive amount. It's a lot of work. And now we're working on the second year. We started the second year, so we hope to finish the second year stuff by maybe Easter of next year, and then the third and the fourth. So it continues.
You have to revise.
There's no rest. There's no rest. We have to keep going. What do we expect? We expect, in English it's easier, because the English teachers are more used to this competence-based approach. As you say, they've already been doing subject projects. So it's no big deal for them. We're just showing them the differences, the situational aspect, the transfer of the competence. These things are new. Maybe a lot of the planning from the students is quite new. But yeah, the basic spirit of the subject projects is the same as the previous one. For the subject teachers, Eki is going to be more of a problem, because Eki is done in maths, it's done in environmental science, it's done in Basque language, it's done in Spanish language, and it's done in history. So there are 5 other subjects that are being done through the competence curriculum. So they've got 6 subjects in the competence curriculum, and they're all the same. They're all situation-based, all on the same in the same framework. So the poor students are going to have to work very hard, because they have to do a lot of things. They have to do presentations in English, in Basque, in Spanish, in math. They all have these final tasks, and really also they're taking place at more or less the same time. because the textbooks are all culminating in the assessment periods, which are, say, let's say, the end of November. We're not sure about this yet. We think it might be a bit too much in some ways, because it's okay for the teachers, because it's only one teaching, but the students are having to do a lot of action, a lot of presentation in different subjects about